honestly, where awakening starts to show up more and you become more aware of it is in how people relate to you. Because when people start commenting on how different you seem or noticing the impact you're having on them and commenting on how what it's like to be around you as you're in your fluid, free, open hearted, vulnerable, spontaneous, loving, caring, creative self. And people are just sort of, wow, being around you is really interesting.
Welcome to Meditation Changes Everything with spiritual teacher Craig Hamilton, a podcast exploring the deeper potentials of meditation practice and how it can change every aspect of human life. In this episode, Craig responds to 3 questions from listeners, all circling around a central question. How do I know if I'm awake? It's a natural question to ask, but what if it leads us in the wrong direction? What if the desire to know the answer is itself part of the obstacle? Craig invites us into a different way of practicing, one that moves beyond trying to get it right and into a deeper exploration of awareness itself. We hope you enjoy the show. Here's Craig.
So whichever way we're coming at this practice, the question of how do I know if I'm there yet? How do I know when I'm doing it right? Is a question that you can pretty much leave aside. You don't really need to engage that question. Meaning it's not, in most ways, most of the time, it's not a helpful question in meditation. Which I know is challenging. He's like, well, you're giving me a technique and I'm trying to do it. And how do I know if I'm doing it or just wasting my time or spinning my wheels? So let me say broadly, I would say, because see, I'm trying to, there's a paradox in spiritual teaching and in spiritual practice, which is that any fixation on a specific goal, I'm trying to have a certain experience, or I'm trying to be in a certain state of consciousness, or I'm trying to hold my attention in a certain place. Any fixation on a specific goal is going to fall. As long as we're fixated in that way, we're going to fall short of the goalless goal. That which transcends anything we can fixate on, that which is beyond anything your mind will be able to grasp or hold on to or even know. So on the one hand, I'm trying to really point us beyond that and say, don't worry about, am I doing it right or not? Or is this it? Or how will I know when I'm there? The point with the practice is you keep exploring it. It's an exploration of awareness. It's an exploration of consciousness. We're working to remove our fixation on the objects in consciousness, meaning the thoughts, the feelings, the sensations, the world, where our attention normally always goes. And so we're working to, let's unglue awareness from the objects that arise within it. Let's unglue you from your identification with and attachment to the things that are going through your mind, the feelings that you're feeling, the sensations swirling in your psyche. Let's free awareness from that. Let's free you from that. So you can discover the spacious expanse that you are. You can discover the infinite depth that you are. Because your attention's not just focused on the little things happening on the surface. It's now free to discover depth. So that's the point of this practice. And that's something that we're just exploring, and there isn't a there in the way there is with most goals you're trying to achieve in life. There's not okay, good, you got it. Hold it right there. It's not. I mean, it can be a little bit like that sometimes, but it's not fundamentally that. And so that's not where I invite you to have your primary attention when you're practicing. I mean, the reason even I'm saying, well, it's a little bit that, but not that, is because, see, as you get into any deep meditation practice, there can be, one of the ways it shows up is that we discover ourselves, our consciousness on a very thin razor's edge, as the traditional metaphor, meaning like, there's a certain way this practice can show up where you become aware of awareness, and you realize it's the first time in your life you've not been focused on an object. You realize, oh, wow, I'm focused on the subject. I'm focused on the experiencer. And it feels very new and different. And you realize it's incredibly delicate awareness, because in a second, you're wanting to fixate on that as an experience that's now an object that you can hold on to, and your mind can get back involved. And so you realize, oh, wow, to not be involved in the mind, to just be aware of awareness with no fixation on any object. This is very subtle, and it's sort of like I can't move a millimeter in consciousness, metaphorically. If I move in any direction, I'm creating an object and I'm fixating on it, and now I'm back in the mind. I'm free from the mind, but this is, so it's like a tightrope. So there is that experience that can occur. And therefore, the reason I'm saying is, and that is an experience where you are very aware of it and not it. You're very aware, oh, this is it, and that's not it, and I need to stay with this, but this is very subtle. And okay, so in a case like that, where that's what's happening for you, and you discover this very delicate razor's edge of freedom, inner freedom, well, then a little bit of, let's call it steering, metacognition, meaning, you're aware of what's happening and you're kind of steering your practice to stay on that tightrope. A little bit of that in that moment is totally applicable and valuable and important. So there is a place and a time for sticking, once something's been revealed, how to hold that delicate consciousness without falling back into identification and fixation and the mind again. So there's a place for that. That is part of the practice. But the reason I don't emphasize it primarily is that only applies after something has already been realized and discovered. And at that point, it's self-apparent that you need to do that. With me, meaning and I'm sure many of you can relate to this at some point in meditation, some really subtle consciousness opens up, and in that moment exactly what you have to do to stay with it. And it's very subtle and it feels very delicate, and you're like, don't breathe. You almost feel like you can't breathe. You just only breathe really slowly, or you might, it's like a little candle flame has started to flicker. Don't blow it out. But my point is, it's self-revealing, and what to do is self-apparent, and the steering that's needed to stay on the razor's edge reveals itself to you naturally as a product of awakening in that moment. See, that's very different from, okay, I'm sitting down, I'm going to try to pay attention to awareness. Is this it? Is that it? Am I there yet? How do I know? Oh, I think that might have been awareness, or was that just a state? The mind is in there measuring, weighing, evaluating, trying to determine and control. See, so, and because that's our tendency, that's how we live, most of us live much of our lives in more of that orientation, right? Trying to predict outcomes, move toward outcomes consciously, deliberately, avoid obstacles, stay in control. That's kind of what we need to do for much of life. That's why I'm saying, generally, broadly in meditation, we leave all that aside and we come to it with a beginner's mind, with an open innocence, and we just try the practice and we just give ourselves to it as it's described to us, the instruction, and we work with it, and we just keep trying to do it. We just keep giving ourselves to it. We keep trying, and the mode is more of an innocent exploration of consciousness. And then in that, so even though I just described this certain kind of razor's edge moment encounter that we can have in meditation, but that's not the only way that awareness of awareness shows up. And that's not the only, real meditation or profound meditation or anything else. See, much of the time, especially with this practice of the different ways we're working with noticing the subject, noticing presence, consciousness, awareness, shifting our attention off of things, it can show up in a lot of different ways. And so part of the practice is not knowing whether this is it. This is the right, this is awareness. The moment you're saying, this is awareness, it's probably not. You probably it might have been for a second, but now it's something you're thinking about, holding in your mind, looking at. It's an object again. So this requires a real unfocusing, freeing ourselves from tightness and narrowness and fixation and focus, and into kind of spacious, open, fluid, free consciousness, exploring itself. You might suddenly find, oh, wow, this is different. Some non-local consciousness becomes apparent to you. But you don't want to grab onto it. Oh, this is it. I got it. It'll be gone in a second. It's like, oh, wow, okay. The question pops up, is this it? Is this what we're aiming for? Just don't answer it. Don't get involved. Say, I don't know. I don't need to know. You don't need to know. That's really the point. You don't need to know when you're doing it exactly right or not. How freeing. Just work with it. See what it brings. Different practices will bring different things on different days, and you just keep the exploration going and deepen and deepen.
In this next segment, Craig answers a question about how we know if we're awake, and whether it's possible to be awake without even realizing it. Here's Craig.
David says, I have a longing and a passion for awakening. My question is, how can I know I'm awake? Or differently stated, can I be awake without knowing it? I trust your repeated guidance to not seek any particular experience in meditation, yet at the same time you encourage awareness of depth, vastness, and infinite expanse of consciousness. I'm able to be aware of awareness and to be present to presence, and in this I experience freedom, but not so much depth and vastness. I also trust that awakening is always here. I admit to wanting a more ecstatic experience at least once in a while in meditation. Any thoughts? David, this is a cool question. I mean, there's a lot of pieces to it. If I want to try to get at the essence, I feel like it's interesting. There's almost kind of two opposing parts to your question, if I'm getting it right. Because one part of what you're asking is, well, you're kind of acknowledging that awakening is not some particular special experience. And that's good that you're acknowledging that, because it's not a specific special kind of experience. And so then you're saying, well, if that's true, that sort of implies that I could be awake without knowing it. Because if would I know it other than by some special experience I was having? So I would say, I mean, this is a very deep, multi-layered kind of teaching really around this. But in terms of can we be awake without knowing it, from one point of view, the answer is definitely yes, in the sense that awakening itself is it's a deconstruction of self-consciousness. The more awake we are, the less self-conscious we are. And therefore also a falling away of the whole self-monitoring function in our psyche. Well, part that's always watching us. How am I doing? Am I doing it right? Am I getting, is this it? That self-monitoring tends to fall away, and the whole self-consciousness and that measuring how I'm doing, and even that being that interested in me and how I'm doing and what's happening for me kind of all falls away as we get more and more opened up to this mystery where we know I can't really know who I am, and I'm not really interested in trying to nail down something that's so vast and profound and deep and subtle. Yeah, I'm more interested in subtlety. So I'm leaving behind the toolkit that I used to use to try to know and understand and interpret reality. I'm letting that fall away and becoming a more spontaneous, fluid being. So in that, you might be showing up as a very awakened person who's not very aware that you're awakened, just because you're not really looking at yourself anymore. You're not really paying that much attention to you. So there's that aspect of this that's very real and true. The kind of dissolution of the structure that tries to keep a coherent picture of you, that just starts to go away. And then, yes, you might do all kinds of very awakened things and be very awakened and not very aware of it. So that's really true. At the same time, awakening itself involves some very profound shifts in consciousness. And when those shifts occur, it would be hard not to notice, because they're so profound and they're so different. And you suddenly, wow, like this shift we're working with this month of moving from being aware of objects in consciousness to suddenly being aware of the subject of your experience, the experiencer. Like that shift that can happen in a moment in meditation, or just happen to you at a moment in your life, it's an extremely noticeable shift. And you say, wow, okay, this is what it is to be aware of the subject. And it's totally different. And I'm not who I thought I was. And I can't even find myself. I'm a non-local event. And wow, it's depending on where you were in yourself when that occurs, it can feel like the whole universe, the whole world just turned upside down in a very good way. So I guess I would say there are a lot of shifts in consciousness that are part of the awakening process that are very noticeable, and therefore you would know when they were occurring and when they happened. On the other hand, as one deepens and this becomes more and more an organic part of one's life, there are all kinds of ways that you're not going to be paying attention to yourself or monitoring yourself to really notice how awake you are. And honestly, where awakening starts to show up more and you become more aware of it is in how people relate to you. Because when people start commenting on how different you seem, or noticing the impact you're having on them, and commenting on how what it's like to be around you as you're in your fluid, free, open hearted, vulnerable, spontaneous, loving, caring, creative self. And people are just sort of, wow, being around you is really interesting. And I'm noticing if you've got people who are semi-conscious around you, they'll start reporting back to you all kinds of things. And maybe even your family, like some of them might be, wow, you've really changed. Something's really happening to you. Then you start to notice, oh, I must really be showing up in a very awakened way, because it's really visible to other people. I wasn't so aware of the shift. And another reason we can be awake without knowing it, I told you this was a long topic. I could talk all day about this. But another reason you can be awake without knowing it is that being awake doesn't mean that your neurosis in your mind goes away. And it doesn't mean that your irrational fears necessarily completely recede from your experience. It doesn't mean that your conditioned reactivity in your psyche completely dissolves. And so often people who are awakening and becoming much more awake and really showing up as a much more conscious, awakened person, they still feel like, oh, well, but I still feel my insecurities, or I still feel my self-doubt and my self-judgment, or I notice I still feel kind of arrogant, or they notice the inner presence of their own ego structures. And they'll conclude, therefore, oh, I must not be very awake because I still felt this way, or I still felt that way. But that is not accurate, because see, you might still, a lot of those patterns are still showing up in your psyche, but what will reveal how awake you are is whether you're enacting those patterns in your behavior. And you might really be not acting out of any of it, but very aware of all of it. But that means you're awake. You're awake because it's no longer affecting your behavior. You might feel a certain old reaction come up. Oh, I feel this shame, or I feel this envy, or I feel this superiority. You might feel these reactions, but because you're awake and conscious, you don't react. Not a word of that comes out of your mouth or your actions. And so you're an awakened person in your actions. That's where it counts. It doesn't count whether you have certain mental and emotional patterns still playing out. So that's another way that we can be very awake, but not really see it ourselves. So, and there's many other layers to this, so I'm going to stop and move to some other things, but hope some of that, I don't know. You also were wondering about, is it okay to want to have some more profound ecstatic spiritual experiences? It's okay to want those things, but we just have to know, and they are profound when they happen, and they're generally good, especially if you're on a healthy spiritual path that doesn't fixate on those things. They can be positive, but you can't really make them happen, and wanting them to happen will probably get in the way. So it's more about being open to whatever comes and realizing that's not really what it's about, which I can tell you no. Thank you.
In our final segment, Craig responds to a fundamental question. Is it possible to be awake without knowing it? He clarifies this subtle distinction and explores what it means to let go of the need to track or evaluate our awakening. Here's Craig.
Several people finding this challenging about, isn't being awake the same thing as knowing you're awake? I see that kind of thread of that running through here. Like, what do you mean if whether I know it or not? And I just think it's interesting because you're obviously, from one point of view, what good is being awake if it's not something that we know? I mean, I guess we could take this another way too, which is that certainly, there's significance to human beings knowing their divinity, or there's such a thing as higher consciousness and lower consciousness. There's such a thing as the sacred dimension of who you are and of reality, of our true nature. And then there's ignorance, which is being ignorant of our true nature, not knowing our true nature. So awakening is knowing that. Awakening is becoming cognizant of what's really true, of who we ultimately are. So that is what we mean by being awake. And so I think it's important to clarify this, because it can otherwise start to sound kind of nihilistic, like you discovering it, you knowing it, you being awake to it doesn't matter. So I think the point here is awakening is awakening out of the dream of ignorance and delusion and this little self that is lost in a dream of its own making, and all the misinterpretation that comes out of that, the lack of clarity, the lack of clear seeing and knowing. So we're awakening out of that to the discovery of what's really the case and of who we really are, which is this extraordinary, sacred, divine dimension of reality that we can begin to know and embody and express. So I would say that's the foundational understanding here. And then can you let go of the need to know whether or not you're awake, the need to experience that, what Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche called spiritual materialism, which is the need to have awakening for ourselves, the need to have a special spiritual experience that is our reference point for awakening, and to it's kind of like we're so materialistic, the need to see myself being awake, the need to know I'm being awake. It's like, can we just give up needing any of this as something that we're holding on to, able to measure? Can we be in the unknown in a way where we don't even know whether we're awake, and that we don't really, that's no longer our concern. Like, oh, I've got it now. Oh, I don't have it now. Is it happening now? It's not happening now. Oh, I was really in this profound experience. Now it's gone away. We're like going beyond that whole way of living and engaging. Our interest has gone somewhere else. It's gone to the unknown itself. And in that, that story of the person on the spiritual journey of awakening has just been let go of entirely. And we just live in a mystery. And then we find out sometimes how awake we are by how we're responding to life. We're responding in this kind of mysterious, miraculous way that's seeming to come from somewhere that we can't see. And we go, wow, awakening is kind of revealing itself, but we didn't know it first. We didn't know, oh, I felt so awake, I felt so free, and then look at how great my response was. It's like that whole person who's in there trying to have the journey and have the story and know it has been let go of. And then there's just this mysterious event called life happening, and sometimes it surprises us in its awe-inspiring grandeur, and other times it might seem very ordinary, but we're not sitting there knowing, oh, look, I was awake then, I wasn't awake then. We've really gone beyond that entirely.
This podcast is supported by our paying members in Craig's Awakened Life membership program. When you join the Awakened Life, each month you'll receive in-depth teachings and guidance in the practice of direct awakening, including a meditation workshop, 4 guided meditations, and a live online retreat with Craig. And when you register today, you can receive your first month for 50% off. Go to awakenedlifemembership.com to learn more and enroll. If you enjoyed today's episode, we hope you'll share our show with others. And please subscribe and rate us wherever you listen to your favorite shows. If you have a minute to write a short review on your podcast app, we would deeply appreciate your support. You can stay connected to the show by subscribing to our newsletter at meditationchangeseverything.com. Each week, we'll send you new audios and videos from Craig, and we'll also let you know when we release new episodes of the show. If the approach to meditation we've been exploring today inspires you, you are invited to tune into a 90-minute online workshop Craig will be hosting called Meditation 2.0, The Miracle of Direct Awakening. In the workshop, he'll share a powerful new approach to meditation practice and guide you in a series of brief meditation experiments so you can experience it for yourself. You can listen to that at freemeditationworkshop.com. That's freemeditationworkshop.com. Check out our show notes for links to all the ways you can stay in touch with Craig's work. Meditation Changes Everything is created by Craig Hamilton, Susan Fries, Morgan Dix, Stephanie Murphy, Will Bowman, and Richard Klein. From all of us, thank you for tuning in.